All right, can you guys see that okay? Yep, okay. All right.
Okay, I'm recording right now.
Okay, good to go. Hey everyone, I hope you're enjoying the workshop so far. We've had some great presentations, but don't worry if you've missed any, because they're all being recorded and will be available on the PM3 YouTube page after the live workshop. I'll be answering any questions about the demo at the end, but if you have any while I'm going, feel free to put them in the chat. So this demo, again, is going to be a Simvascular demo, but I'm starting the pipeline from a bit of a different place. And so that sort of demonstrates just the flexibility of Simvascular. You can really use it in a lot of different ways. They have, there's a lot of power in the segmentation and modeling, but and so you can use that, or if you just choose to use it for your simulation, you can also do that. Yeah, so without further ado, I'll just get into it. I'll first get you started off just getting acquainted with the GUI. What's that? So first at the top menu, we have the just the Simvascular menu. And this has the preferences option. This is where you are able to configure your settings and such. Although
Can I interrupt for a minute, please?
Sorry?
Can I interrupt for just half a second?
Yep.
At least on my screen, your Zoom share appears to be slightly out of focus.
Is it? How's that?
It is slightly out of focus, but
Can you read the words at least?
slightly.
No.
I'm not sure what I can do about that.
Is there going to be a lot of reading?
Hopefully not. I will tell you what all the buttons are. So.
Okay.
Yeah, sorry about that if you can't see clearly, but I will be reading out all the buttons that I click. So hopefully that'll help you out. So where was I? Yeah, so the preferences. So that's where you can configure your program, but unless you're getting into the development side of things, I would recommend that you leave that kind of as it comes installed. Next up, we have the File tab. And so this is where you can create your project, save it, open it, and close it. Next is the Edit tab. Here you have options to undo and redo, which is very useful if you make a mistake. We also have the Tools tab, which contains all the different modules that are available within the GUI, such as our modeling, meshing, and our simulation. We also have a window control and help menu available. Next off, the toolbar. So in the toolbar, we have more or less the same options that were in the top menu with the addition of this image navigator. And the image navigator is useful if you're doing image processing like Mia did in her presentation, or segmentation. You can easily slide through all the slices of your volume. To the left is the data manager. And this is what you use to navigate all the data that's stored in your project. In the center of the screen, we have our 4 views. axial, sagittal, coronal, and the 3D view. Since I'm not doing any segmentation today, I'll only need the 3D view. So I'll maximize it by clicking the middle button at the top right corner of the view. And then we have our maximized 3D view. Then on the right here, we have our modules tab, which we'll be using quite a bit once we get started with our project. Now, I'm going to create a new project by clicking File. And then clicking Create SV Project. And if you're following along, oh, sorry about that. I forgot. So I've actually got the same model that I'm using. I will share it with you. So if you're following along, you can download that and actually do the modeling pipeline along with me as I go. Sorry, that was just a little aside. So I'm going to create my project. I'm going to name it aneurysm because that's what we're going to be modeling today. And below is the directory that I'm going to be saving it in. And I click OK. Sorry. So you can see the data manager is showing my project with a bunch of different modules under it. The data manager actually shows a representation of the file structure that is created in your directory when you create the project. So if you look in that directory, you will see a folder for each of the modules. So now I'm going to import my model file by right-clicking on models. And at the bottom of the menu, we have two options. If you're doing image segmentation and everything in some vascular, like Mia did, then you're going to click Create Model and select the segmentation that you've created. But in my case, I'm going to select Import Solid Model. So I have a VTP file here, but STL files can also work in SimVascular, so you can go ahead and import that. And as you can, and I'll name it model. Now, when you create your model, it'll often prompt you to generate faces for this model. So you just click yes, and then use the default separation angle to create your models. Now, as you can see, the model is not visible in the display window, and that's because the imported model is off axis from our view. We can fix this by clicking the little Cartesian coordinate button and clicking Reset View. And now I'll activate the modeling module by going to the data manager and double clicking on my model. As you can see, there's only one face on the list, and that's our vessel wall. There are holes at the inlets and outlets of the vessels, but in order to proceed, we need to fill these with faces. And to do that, we just go to Face Ops on the right and click Fill Holes with IDs. Fill holes with IDs. So now we have all our faces, but I'm going to rename them and assign each of them a type. To select a face, you can either click it on the list, like so, or you can hover over it in the display and click S. So I'll name them comprehensively so that I can keep track of them later in the process. So I'll name this one wall because it's the it's the blood vessel wall. And then I usually like to go through the other ones, and I like to select them using the visualizer rather than the. Sorry. My microphone just stopped working for a sec. Yeah, so I like to go through them on the visualizer and name them so that way it's just easier to see, especially if you're working with sort of a complex geometry like this is. You can name them according to what the vessels are actually named anatomically. There we go. Three. Final one. Okay. Now to assign a type, you just click in the type box of the table, and you can see a drop-down menu of 2 options. There. So for the vessel wall, you have to select wall, and then for the inlets and outlets, the faces, you set it to cap. So here I'll just go through and set them all to the appropriate type. There we go. And then I will save my process by clicking command, or save my project by clicking Command S. Okay. Now to generate a mesh, you go to the data manager and right click meshes and go to the bottom and click create mesh. There. Now this window will pop up and I'm going to select my model, which is just model. The mesh type is the software used to generate the mesh, the tetrahedral mesh. And in this version of SimVascular, TetGen is the only option, but it's a free package that works very well. And then I'll just go ahead and name this mesh. And okay. Great. Okay, so now I just double click on mesh to open up the SV meshing module. And the minimum requirement to create the mesh is to set the global max edge size, which the documentation says should be half the radius of the smallest face. But they have a tool in here to estimate it for you. So I'll just go ahead and click that. Okay, and then as well, you should make sure that surface meshing and volume meshing are selected. And then you can go ahead and click Run Mesher. And this window pops up. This will take a few minutes, so I'll take this time to talk to you about some of the other options. So the first option we have here is boundary layer meshing. Now, boundary layer meshing is a special option that creates a finer layer of mesh near the vessel wall. This can do a few things. So it can save computational time and also give a more accurate result because it accounts for the fact that there's often a sharp velocity gradient near the vessel wall because the velocity at the vessel wall must be zero due to the laws of fluid mechanics. This is also called a no-slip condition, where the velocity is zero at the wall. And they recommend that you use this under laminar flow conditions and when you know that there's a preferred flow direction inside your vessel. However, I don't use it in my modeling because of the complex geometry of the aneurysm, and also because it takes longer to generate the mesh. Sorry, next is the radius-based meshing option. Now, radius-based meshing is a good option if you have blood vessels of varying scales, so extremely large or extremely small blood vessels. For example, if your model includes maybe part of the aorta, but also the coronary arteries, what it does is it calculates a mesh with a coarseness proportional to the radius of the vessel. This also takes slightly longer to generate, and so I won't be using it in this model because, again, it's not applicable. And then the final option here we have is fast meshing. Now, fast meshing can be good if you're just doing some testing, although the meshes are often less robust and can give you less accurate results. Okay, just wait a few seconds for there we go. So when it's done meshing, this window will pop up and it shows you a few of the statistics for the mesh. If you want to see it again, you can click the mesh info button at the top right, and you can see those statistics again. All right, so next up, we're going to create our simulation job. So we right-click on simulations in the data manager. There you go. And then select create simulation job at the bottom of the menu. So here I will select my model. And then I will name it sim. Click OK. And again, to open the SV simulation module, I'll just double click on sim. So now I'm just going to take a second to talk about units, because if you're like me, the units can get a bit tricky. And it's a really good way to mess up your simulation results. So SimVascular doesn't have any requirements for which units you need to use, although other than that you're being consistent all the way through your whole job. Although they do recommend that you use CGS units, which stands for centimeters, grams, seconds. And you can see that the default values for density and viscosity are already in CGS units. They do have a table in the documentation website with these density and viscosity values in MGS or SI units, but I prefer to use CGS units with SimVascular. The key thing to remember for CGS units is that flow is in milliliters per second, flow rate, I should say, and pressure is in dynes second per centimeter to the 5. Important conversion to remember is that 1 millimeter mercury, which is what a lot of clinicians typically use, is equal to 1,333 dynes second per centimeter 5. So I'll just say that again. 1 millimeter mercury is 1,333 dynes second per centimeter to the 5. Now the units aren't super important to this demo because I'll mostly just be using made up values, but when you're using literature or measured values, it's very important to get these units correct. So I'll just put this initial pressure to 100,000, which is approximately 80 millimeters mercury. And I do this because if you leave it at 0, it takes much longer for the simulation result to reach convergence. So you need to run the simulation for longer to get to a good result. And next, we need to set the inlet and outlet boundary conditions. So you can set the type for each cap either by right-clicking and selecting BC, or selecting set BC, sorry. So go to BC type, right-click, and click set BC. Or by double-clicking inside the BC type box. And then there you can see the drop-down menu with all the different types. So the resistance, RCR, and coronary types are all methods of loosely coupling the outlet surface to a distal pressure using a lumped parameter model, while the prescribed velocity at the top is a tightly coupled velocity, which is typically used at the inlet. So here I'll set all the outlet parameters to simple resistance boundary conditions. Just by clicking in the BC type box. There we go. And then to set the distal pressure, what I'll do is I'll select all of the outlets by holding Command on Mac. Then right-click within the selected ones and click Set Distal Pressure. And then I'll just set that to the equivalent of 17 millimeters mercury. Okay, then next up, another useful tool that Symbascular provides within the boundary conditions is the split resistance tool. This is good for if you know the total resistance of maybe a bunch of vessels, but you don't know the resistance that you want for each individual outlet. And so say I know the resistance of all the blood that I want flowing through this vessel, then split resistance is an excellent tool to use. So what I'll do again is I'll select all of my outlets. Then I right-click within the selected area. And I click split resistance. Then what I'm going to do is enter the total resistance. And click OK. So this will calculate a resistance for each, such that the total equivalent resistance is the resistance I entered. But they're also proportional to the area of the vessel outlet. So as you can see, all the different values are different, and that's because the resistances are proportional to the lumen area of the vessel outlet. Okay, now for the inlet, I'll use the prescribed velocity boundary condition type. So I'll click set BC. There we go, prescribed velocity. So the so the analytic shape determines the velocity profile that's imposed on the surface. So I'll just drop down that menu there. So for larger vessels, you would use more like a parabolic analytic shape with laminar flow. But if you have pulsatile flow, you probably would want to use a Womersley analytic shape. And then plug would be better for smaller blood vessels. So I'll select Womersley for this demo. Next, the flow file tells the model what the flow rate should be at each different time point. So I'll quickly show you what, I'll select my flow file there. And then I'll quickly show you my inlet file. Just a sec. There we go. So remember that flow rate are in units, or the units are milliliters per second. So here the left column is time in seconds, and the right column is flow rate. The convention for symbascular is that positive flow rates flow out from the model, meaning that this would have, at the inlet, would have fluid flowing out of my model. And so in order to reverse that, I'm going to go to the window and I'm going to click flip normal. And that will make sure that my fluid is flowing into the model instead of out. Next, the point number is the number of data points that make up one flow period. And so in this case, it is 80. And then finally, the period is the length in seconds of one period, which they automatically determine, but sometimes can be slightly off. So I'm just going to set that to 0.8. Okay. So next up is wall properties. Just click down to wall properties. There's 3 options for wall properties. 2 of them are deformable and 1 rigid. Deformable is much more computationally expensive, but in some cases can give you a better result. Although you do need to know the mechanical properties of your vessel for that, as Sanjay was saying before. I'll just show you the deformable option. So those are all the properties you need to know, but I will be going with rigid. So onto solver parameters. In the vast majority of cases, you should just leave most of these as the default value, but you do need to set the first 3. So the time step size is the amount of time between each solution generated. So I'll just set that to 0.1. The number of time steps is the length of your simulation divided by the time step size. So I'll put 24 so as to run the simulation for 2.4 seconds or 3 cardiac cycles. And finally, the number of time steps between restarts determines how frequently the solutions are saved. I typically use a value of 1 unless I have a very small time step size, as that can start to use up
Can
a
I
lot of.
interrupt, please, Tim?
Mhm.
Can I please interrupt?
Yep.
Over here in this table, your option number 1 is sort of, I need more explaining of. Option number 1, right at the top of the table,
Yep.
where you've written point 1.
Yeah.
So to its left-hand side, it says number of time steps.
Yes.
So that sort of seems to suggest that you need an integer for a value, don't you?
Yes. I believe I made a mistake here.
So, and then the time step size is your integration parameter.
Yeah.
And that should be a suitably small number
Yes.
where your solver will converge to, using which your solver will converge to. So
Yeah.
are you going to now flip those two numbers back and forth?
Yes, I will. I made a small mistake in the recording of this demo, so
Okay.
that will be fixed. Not to worry, sir. Yeah. So then I'll just go back through down to set that to 1. There we go. And then the last thing you need to take a look at is line 26. So the documentation recommends that if you are running a pulsatile simulation or a transient, some people would say, that you set this to a value of 10. And that's just to allow the solver to more time steps to be able to reach the solution. Now all that's left to do is to select our mesh and click create data files for simulation. Oops, yeah, so there's my error. So I'll just go back and there, fix those values. This is also a good demonstration of how helpful the GUI is, because if you are just doing this all without the GUI and entering all your scripts, there's no way to catch that. So the GUI can definitely help you out with making sure all your values are reasonable. So where was I? Now, okay, so I definitely recommend, if possible, that you run the actual simulation on a supercomputer, as they can take an extremely long time. And I'll show you the scripts to do this in just a bit. But now to run the simulation in the GUI, what you would do is you would select MPI. Oh, sorry, create data files for simulation. Yeah, so so to run the simulation, what you would do is you select MPI, and then you would set the number of desired processors to as many processors as you can, basically. The more processors that you use, the faster your simulation will go. So here I will just set this to 4. Next, you need to set the starting number step. So this determines the time point that your simulation starts at. If you've just created your simulation job, as we just did, then you need to set the starting step number as 0, as your simulation only has the initial conditions. But if you've already simulated some time, you can actually set this to a time step that you've already calculated. Yeah, so I'll just set that to 0 then. And next is the post-processing. Now, I do recommend that you also do your post-processing on a supercomputer, but to do it in the GUI, what you have to do is select the folder containing your output files right here. By default, this is in your simulation folder. So if you look in the actual directory, so sim in my case, and maybe yours, and in the folder will, inside that directory, the folder will be called something like for-prox-case. Then also you have to enter the start and end steps that you wish to process, and the interval between those steps. So say I only wanted the last cardiac cycle, I might put steps 17 to 24. And I would put 1 for my increment. The other options are all relatively self-explanatory. Yeah, all relatively self-explanatory. And then you would click convert to start the post-processing. But to do the full job on a supercomputer cluster, there's a few steps you need to take. You'll need to copy the entire simulation folder onto the computer or supercomputer drive. So again, sim in this case. And then you need to navigate into that simulation folder and run three binary programs. The first is the preprocessor, and it is run using this script that I'm about to show you. There we go. Hopefully you can see that. So this one is pretty simple. It's just the binary is called svpre, and then the your pre-solver file should be in that folder, and it will be called whatever the name of your simulation job is, .svpre. Okay, so I'll just close that then. And next is the actual solver. And so this is going to run your actual solution for your simulation. Make that bigger too. And so this is specifically running it using MPI, which I mean, if you're running it on a supercomputer, it only makes sense to use the MPI because that's the whole purpose for running it on a supercomputer. Then you can run it with as many processes as are available to you on the cluster. And that is what significantly speeds up your simulation. But yeah, so this is what's going to take up the most of your computational resources. So if you are running this command, then I definitely suggest that you do it by submitting a job to the supercomputer rather than just running it from command line. Then finally, we have the post processor. So I'll just close that and bring over. Now, there's a lot of options for this program, as you can see. So you can determine kind of what you want to change and what you need according to your experiment and your research question. But this also takes quite a bit of computational resources. So if you're doing a really big job or a really long simulation, I would also recommend that you submit this as a job and not just run it from the command line as well. And that will output all of your, well, depending on your options that you select, it'll output a bunch of VTK, VTP, or VTU files. Yep. And then that is the end of this demo. And so now if you guys have any questions, just stop the share. Yeah, so if you guys have any questions, now's the time.
Beautiful talk, Tim. Thank you very much for that in-depth insight into how to use the graphical user interface, the GUI. I believe it will form a very strong starting point. And I propose that you and we should document this further in written form as a web page, a HTML file, an annotated HTML file, which can also form an appendix of a upcoming graduate thesis.
Yeah, for sure. I have all the steps written out, so that can very easily be.
It falls to yourself, I believe, Tim, that we have to digest enough that the product can be uptaken by people who are more interested in the biology and the prediction of things rather than the actual solvers. Personally, I'm interested in your MPI exec minus N288, but that's just me.
Yeah.
But again, thank you very much. Please, can we have a discussion? Tim, if you don't mind, after your discussion, I would like to continue this recording to somewhat complete the story.
Okay.
Yes. So the floor is open for discussion now. So I'll start the discussion. Tim, could you explain to me how you came up with the MPI exec minus N 288? 288 is not important. It's the use of MPI exec. Where did you come up with that from?
So that's the recommended way to run the symbascular binaries from the documentation.
And whose recommendation might that be?
It's sorry if I can just go to the website and refresh my memory. It's David Parker on the symbascular forum recommended. Yeah.
I thought that was the case. So here's a little bit of explanation, and please assume that what I'm about to say is wrong.
Okay.
But here's a little bit of sort of further explanation to the use of MPI exec. In as much as our national services run something called CentOS 7, they run CentOS, CentOS 7. And our national services have a bucket load of middleware that has been developed over the last 50, 60 years or so. The wrapper for running a distributed memory job is, I believe, called srun. So srun in its process will access MPI exec. You do not have to. I strongly propose and suggest that we stick to the middleware suggested by our national services.
Okay.
If ever you go to David Palmer's home and he feeds you, clothes you, and gives you access to his cluster, or Alison Marsden's cluster, then comes the use of MPI exec. Again, if you come across this cluster here, this is 100 processes. This is called Kirk. So if you come across this cluster, then you might use MPI exec. Otherwise, on our national services, we are using srun as a wrapper. Srun.
Okay.
Okay. And as I said, please do explore yourselves and convince yourselves that all of Beluga, Cedar, Graham, as well as Niagara take srun as a wrapper around all these distributed memory as well as shared memory services. Now, the second comment that I would like to make here is that there are two kinds of parallel programs. One is called distributed memory parallel program, and that is what you are using. However, it is highly and thoroughly recommended that you explore and exploit the architecture of your individual machines. Taking, say, for example, Beluga, for example, Beluga is made up of several nodes. Each node has round about 30, 35, maybe 42 processes apiece. And all of these 40 processes share the same memory. And therefore, if by any chance your job is to fit within 40 processes in the time scale that you're interested in, say you need your results by day after tomorrow, and therefore you need only 40 processes, then it is strongly suggested that we explore ways of running your simulation in something called a shared memory paradigm, also called OpenMP. However, your aneurysms are horrible, horrible large things with many, many thousands of tetrahedral elements and many tens of thousands of nodes and edges. And therefore, it is likely that our requirement is more the distributed memory and therefore the use of multiple nodes. So if you use, say, 40 nodes, you're using 40 multiplied by 40 number of processes. And that's where the distributed memory thing comes in. And to finish this outburst, I believe, again, don't take my word for it, but I believe the modular programming of especially your favorite platform, Simvascular, now it is PM3 Simvascular, but still is a hybrid shared memory, distributed memory paradigm. And therefore, if you ask for full number of nodes, then each node is used as a shared memory processor. But each of the nodes, rather than individual cores, are saving information using message passing interface, MPI.
Okay.
And so I wish that someone, you, me, or all of us, we explore this kind of functionality, because eventually our calculations are going to be for some sort of service, and we will be doing large calculations, not for research purposes, but as a service. You want to save the lives of critically ill patients. Yeah. So we have to know how to exploit all of these things taken together. But again, thank you for that thorough explanation. Keith has a question. Yep.
Just to inquire more about the note that you left on, Dr. Karches, for application to clinical purposes, especially the demonstration that Tim was showing, and big picture, a lot of the finite element methods that were presented in these workshops, what would be the biggest obstacles in transporting them to a clinically a clinical application?
Okay.
In my opinion, the biggest obstacle is the uptake of this software by clinicians themselves, which I think is, the biggest obstacle in any kind of computational medicine is having the clinicians actually uptake your software and start using it, rather than whatever their kind of Stone Age techniques that they're used to.
Excellent use of word.
But, and I'm sure Sanjay agrees, but yeah, that is definitely the biggest obstacle in my opinion.
As you saw, Keith, Riva is totally upset with how much maths the clinicians have uptaken. She's finished speaking about that for several minutes this morning. Apart from the issue of uptake by individual clinicians, Keith, how about we discuss exactly this issue tomorrow again?
Fantastic.
On what the obstacle of uptake is. There is a huge, massive obstacle. And as you may or may not agree, Keith, we have a large accumulated know-how of the technical expertise. Technical expertise is not a problem anymore. Between the 3 or 4 of us, between the 10 of us, between the 12 of us, we know enough. And therefore, the obstacles might lie outside of the technical expertise. And you may be a key sort of player in changing this sort of situation.
If it's, if, as you guys are pointing out, if it's an uptake problem, as you said, that's an issue, but in a sense, it's the best case scenario, because that means that there's no functional obstacles to the software to implement it clinically. And would you agree that there's no functional obstacles in implementing it clinically?
The non-uptake is a functional obstacle.
Yeah. I mean, it definitely depends on the platform that you're talking about, right? Like, but And so in that case, Symbascular is a really good example because it is, you know, as far as computational medicine is concerned, it's a fairly easy to use, and it works quite well. But again, there's a lot of steps and a lot of you know.
And I'll pick up on that in that even as whoever that guy is, David Palmer and his friends and his cronies have already gone and made it so easy for any Tom, Sanjay, and Tim to pick it up and use it. Okay. It has still taken between 1 and 2 years for us to get to this stage. And so this is the kind of thing that scientific software is. And there's no getting around this. You cannot make a Microsoft Word type of thing out of this kind of thing. You cannot. You have to be a certain level of intelligent, even clever. Why just intelligent? Diligent. And you have to appreciate that availability of a supercomputer is secondary. Availability of a very optimized software is secondary to the person's capacity of doing work. So unless Tim spends hours and days and nights and weekends and mornings and afternoons doing the one same thing, it's never going to work. It's never. But I'm happy to announce that we are on the other side now. It works. We have 2 examples of how it works. Can I now show everyone a third example of how things work? Please, just to complete the story here.
Yeah.
Okay, so here goes 10 minutes, 10 minutes in this recording, and I might steal 10 minutes from the next recording as well because, you know, it's a recording. So there we have it.
Sorry.
This goes to, I'm sharing my screen now, people. I'm sharing my screen now. And tell me if you do not see my terminal over here. Do you see my terminal over here?
Perfectly.
Yeah. And so this relates to work that Lawrence is doing. If the thing is going to let me in.
See, this is the functional obstacle. I was not just kidding.
Dr. Karch will be back in 10 minutes.
Gotcha.
So a reason why young Jeremiah cannot join us right now is because young Jeremiah and the young Tim Hunter have gone and made this reduced order model of the whole body human circulation. And like it or not, a reduced order model looks something like this. There is a directory, there is a folder, there are 2 folders written in blue. One is called model, the other is called random parameters, and there are a few other files, helper files. These helper files talk to said middleware, and the middleware will then go and run your job for us momentarily. In a minute, we might run the job. Let's first go and examine what Tim's model looks like. Typically, we have a whole bunch of C files. Yours truly programs most efficiently in low-level programming. Unfortunately, I'm not so proficient in MATLAB. In fact, I have a distaste for MATLAB, but that's a different story. That's a totally different story. Importantly, we also have header files. Regardless of what the files are called, the extensions are important over here. The header files are the ones that constitute all the modules and functions that Tim and Jeremiah have implemented. Summarily, these 8 or 10 files consist of blood flowing through the whole human body. There's a whole bunch of kidneys in there. There's a couple of livers there. There's half a brain in there. And for the brain and heart, especially, the novelty here is that Tim has very nicely gone and implemented a feedback loop like electrical engineers do. So if the heart is facing a lot of pressure, the brain then gets a signal to slow it down, that sort of thing. Okay, and that is where something called delay differential equations might come in, something that I mentioned yesterday. Someone mentioned it yesterday, something like that. But this is what a reduced order model looks like. Now we can, these are all, unlike all your PowerPoint files, unlike all your video files, unlike all your point and click files, low-level programming is mostly in ASCII text. It can only carry 250 ASCII characters. And we can go and look in any one of these files, whatever it is that they say. And so the morphology of our driver programs is that we have a whole bunch of commentary there. See, it was Tim, it was Jeremiah, it was me, it was a couple of other people messing about with the same thing. And so we must speak with each other. We write in plain language what the thing is about. Exactly where to look for information. We write it there. We also write what the units being used are. Okay. And here's the initial conditions and such like, and that sort of thing. Okay. Now there's a whole bunch of function calls. I'll highlight one of the function calls. All our platforms, people, are based on highly optimized libraries, scientific libraries that give us really efficient and accurate working out of many, many, many things that we have to do. And today, in the next hour or so, we might speak about two things. One is pair review VTK, and the other one is solving of ordinary differential equations. What I have highlighted is solving of a little piece of the solving of ordinary differential equations. Okay, so two messages here, people. The first is this is the brand new upcoming whole human circulation model. So any minute now, it might get accepted and be published in the open access literature. Nonetheless, for all of us, it is already available. Tim and Jeremiah have put in lots of work in here. So what I'm about to do is do a couple of things. I'm going to show you first what I'm about to do. And in this script here, this is a bash script using which I'm going to run this circulation model 4 times over. And the model code is already organized in such a way to output one column as time and the next column as flow rate. Exactly the kind of thing that Mia was talking about, exactly the kind of thing that Tim was talking about. We will see a file that comes out in a minute. For some odd reason, this runs 4 instances of the thing, because Jeremiah decided to test not only the effects of a disease called dialysis treatment, but also of a therapy called hypothermia, therapeutic hypothermia. So there are 4 cases that will run. And how to do that when it comes to a user. So Tim is a maker of certain things. He might be in the middle of user and developer. But when it goes to a user, this is what a user might do to one or all of our models to run the thing. As simple as that. As simple as that. So you run this thing, yeah, and notice the before running stage. So there were 2 directories. There are 2 directories here. There's a few helper scripts here with sh at the end, and I'm going to run this 3rd option here, run HDT. And if I run this thing, and if I put an ampersand there, it runs in the background. Yeah. And we can then ask the question whether it is running or not. And this is a little bit messed up, but PM3 user is apparently running something. And as you can see, it has now produced a 3rd directory called rundir0. And this ran, as Jay was saying, this ran as a trivially parallel job, as a serial farm. And if we look inside of this rundir0, it may have produced one directory where I'm happy to announce that there is nothing. So let's try this again. I see. Bear with me. This will work. Yes, Keith.
I just wanted to inquire a little bit, and maybe, and Tim can also answer this, is the whole body circulation, is that a lumped parameter model, or is there also like 2D, 3D components?
It's exactly a lumped parameter model.
Okay.
What you see me doing is the prudent use of a elegant underlying library called AutoTools, and I'm totally and completely in love with AutoTools. I will not live without AutoTools. The manifestation of AutoTools is a makefile. This is not working out as well as I thought it should, but at least I've shown you the form of one of our lumped parameter models here. And so if you give me half a minute, I have to finish this now.
Sanjay, did you do any work on the installation of sundials on our?
There's no sundials on Beluga. There's no
Oh.
sundials on Beluga.
So that could be it.
That is it. Right, found it. Bear with me, just half a minute. So unfortunately, I cannot run this thing for you now. However, a new copy is being uploaded as we speak. So the files have finished uploading. And so the solution comes to us. What I essentially do is use the shell script, which has been prepared for our users, those who do not wish to partake in the joys of development. You run a simple file like that. That driver goes and accesses lots of code in several of the directories, in this case called model and random parameters, and produces a folder called directory called rundir0. Let's go and look inside of rundir0. And there's on the subdirectory there. And as you can see, if you somehow manage to run this thing successfully, it outputs several files with extensions .dat. Now, these are, as I said, these are various cases that Timothy and Jeremiah chose to explore. One was a disease, ischemia due to dialysis, and the other one was therapy. if I cool a dialysis patient, do the side effects of dialysis reduce? Now, between me, Mia, and Tim, we are only interested in the control case, which is over here in this list named as output 00000.dat, the first file in the list. And so let's go and examine what is inside of this file. And as Mia was saying, you have exactly two columns over there. The first column is your time, and the second column is your flow rate. Now, according to the lumped parameter model that we are about to sort of bring out, that Tim is about to bring out, for a long time during the cardiac cycle, there is no flow into the aorta. And so let's see the next section of this file by pressing the space bar. There's still no thing, but eventually at second 40.32, a little bit of flow starts going in there. It increases and eventually it starts going down some. And so this profile of aortic inlet flow is obtained by very prudently setting up the cardiac elastances, by setting up the forcing terms in the ordinary differential equation for your cardiac cycle. So here in the lumped parameter model, the convention was that flow goes out of the heart and into the aorta, and therefore your second column remains positive. People remember, Mia has told us that the second column by convention of the makers of Simvascular has to be negative if you are shoving it into the aorta. Okay. And so in this manner, you might generate your boundary conditions for Tim's 3D, for Mia's 3D, for Jeremiah's 3D, using your lumped parameter model, your reduced order parameter, your reduced order models. Okay, so this is one way of generating your boundary conditions of your more realistic boundary conditions. You are fully justified to apply just a truncated sine wave or cosine wave here, fully justified. But if you want to come somewhat closer to representing your virtual patient, this is one way to go about it. Now, the technical hurdle, since you're concerned with technical hurdles, Keith, the technical hurdle here is that this simple lumped parameter model itself has 1,053 unknown parameters. So go and fit those parameters for the next 10 years or so. So there you have it. So that could be one of the lesser technical problems here. Now, the next thing I'm about to show is how were these 4 output files obtained. Output 0, output 1, output 2, and output 3. They were obtained by running the same program called HDT 4 times over as a serial farm. Okay, because the workings of output 0 are not at all connected to the workings of output 1, not to output 2, not to 3. These are independent simulations. They run on their own accord without talking to each other. In contrast, Tim's message passing interface model must talk to each other at every time step, maybe at every iteration as well. And so how did we did this serial job? Is simply by shoving the first simulation onto one processor, and at the same time, you shove the second simulation to another processor. And so you keep going. And so this is something that Tim did a lot over Christmas, last Christmas. He did a lot of this. He is set up to do even more of this over the next few months, a whole bunch of it. Jay has just finished doing zillions and zillions of this over the last 4 months or so. Okay, serial farming. And here's me plugging our upcoming human circulation model, and watch the space. There will be a rat whole body circulation model in a reduced order form soon enough. And in that rat work are involved Tim, is also involved Gabriel. Okay. And so this is what I thought might shed some light on how you might construct your inlet boundary conditions for your 1D and 3D simulations. Okay. So
Indeed, comprehensive.
we can get, yes, we can get, Keith, as you decided, this that the technical expertise is the least of your problems. So we can give it a few minutes till we move on to the next part. Yeah, seeing as we are now among friends over here, I think we are among friends. I'm sure we are all enemies of each other. There is also the very accomplished lady in Texas Heart Center who does this sort of thing. One of our Dr. Goldman's friends called Matty Olufsen specializes in this kind of thing. But next in line is the bunch of us. And never mind that there's no uptake, because we are now positioned for extreme uptake of everything that has been produced.
That's fantastic.
And so the intention is firstly uptake, then we enjoy the science, because if you and I do our jobs properly, then the clinicians can go and do their jobs properly. Yeah. So that is the ethos, and yes, so there are mechanisms now in place, Keith.
Right.
And there's just one piece missing over here. You. Yes. You know, PM3 needs you thing. So yes, so unless anyone has any objections, people, I'll take 10 minutes off of Jeremiah's time as well, but this recording can be stopped and we can move into the next part of our day 2, into the last part of day 2.